Dear Hazel of Squirrel Nut, in the lovely springtime of 1952, you will just be 16, and perhaps you will be tempted to open this book, whose title, I like to think, will be wafted to you euphonically by the wind bending the hawthorns. All possible dreams, hopes, and illusions will dance, I hope, night and day, illuminated by your curls, and I shall doubtless be there no longer. I would have liked to be there just to see you. Mysterious, resplendent horsemen will dash by at dusk beside the changeable streams. Garbed in light sea-green veils, a young girl will glide sleepwalking under high archways, where a single votive lamp will flicker. But the spirits of the reeds, the tiny cat seeming to sleep in the rings, the elegant toy pistol perforated with the word ball, will keep you from taking these scenes tragically. Whatever your lot will be, increasingly fortunate or entirely other, I cannot know. You will delight in living, expecting everything from love. Whatever happens from now until you read this letter, it seems that what we least expect is what will come to pass. Let me believe you will be ready then to incarnate this eternal power of woman, the only power I have ever submitted to. Whether you have just closed a school desk on a world crow blue and high fantasy, or whether your sunny silhouette, except for the bouquet of flowers on your blouse, is cast against the wall of a factory, I am far from sure about your future. Let me believe that these words, mad love, will one day correspond uniquely to your own delirium. They will not keep their promise because they will only enlighten for you the mystery of your birth. For a long time I thought it was the gravest insanity to give life. In any case, I held it against those who had given it to me. It may be that you would hold it against me on some days. That is, in fact, why I have chosen to see you at 16, when you cannot hold it against me. What am I saying? To look at you? No, rather to try to see through your eyes, to look at myself through your eyes. My little child, just 8 months old, always smiling, made at once like coral and like pearls. You will know then that any element of chance was strictly excluded from your coming, that your birth came about at the exact time that it was supposed to, neither sooner nor later, and that no shadow was awaiting you above your wicker cradle. Even that great poverty which had been and remains mine let up for a few days. I was not, as it happens, opposed to this poverty. I accepted to pay the price for not being a slave to life, to settle for the right I had assumed once and for all to not express any ideas but my own. We were not many in doing this. Poverty passed by in the distance, made lovelier and almost justified, a little like what has been called, in the case of a painter who was one of your first friends, the blue period. It seemed the almost inevitable consequence of my refusal to behave the way almost all the others did, whether on one side or on another. This poverty, whether you have had the time to dread it or not, imagine it was only the other side of that miraculous coin of your existence. The night of the sunflower would have been less radiant without it. Less radiant because then love would not have had to confront all it did confront, because it would not have had, in order to triumph, to count in everything and for everything on itself only. Perhaps this was a terrible imprudence, but it was exactly this imprudence that was the loveliest jewel of the case. Beyond this imprudence there remained nothing except an even greater one, that of bringing you to life, whose perfumed breath you are. It was necessary, at least, to extend from one to the other a magic cord, stretched to the breaking point above the precipice so that beauty could rise with just its balancing rod to pluck you like an impossible flower of the air. May you delight at least one day in believing you are this flower, that you were born with no contact with the ground, unfortunately unsterile as it is with what is commonly called human affairs. You have come from the slightest shimmer of what was rather late for me the goal of poetry, to which I have been devoted since my youth. Of that poetry I continue now to serve, scorning everything else. You appeared there as if by magic, and if ever you detect a trace of sadness in these words that for the first time I address to you alone, say to yourself that this enchantment continues and will continue to be identified with you, that it is strong enough to rise above any heartbreak, forever and for a long time. Those two great warring expressions that confront each other whenever it is a question of love have never exchanged more blinding sword thrusts than today above me in a sky entirely like your eyes, whose whites are still so blue. Of these two expressions, the one that wears my colors, even if its star may be waning now, even if it must lose, is forever. Forever, as in the oaths that girls insist on hearing. Forever, as on the white sand of time and through the grace of this instrument which is used to measure it, but only fascinates you and leaves you hungry, reduced to a stream of milk endlessly pouring from its glass breast. Despite everything, I shall have maintained that this expression, forever, is the master key. What I have loved, whether I kept it or not, I shall love forever. As you are called upon to suffer also, I wanted, in completing this book, to explain to you. I have spoken of a certain sublime point on the mountain. It was never a question of establishing my dwelling on this point. It would, moreover, from then on have ceased to be sublime, and I should myself have ceased to be a person. Unable reasonably to dwell there, I have nevertheless never gone so far from it as to lose it from view, as to not be able to point it out. I have chosen to be this guide, and therefore I have forced myself not to be unworthy of the power which, in the direction of eternal love, had made me see and granted me the still rarer privilege of having others see. I have never been unworthy. I have never ceased to identify the flesh of the being I love and the snow peaks and the rising sun. I have tried only to know the hours of love's triumph, whose necklace I hear clasp about your throat. Even the black pearl, the last one, I am sure you will understand what weakness attaches me to it, what supreme hope of conjuration I have placed on it. I do not deny that love has a difference with life. I say it should vanquish, and in order to do so, should rise to such a poetic consciousness of itself that every hostile thing it meets should melt in the hearth of its own splendor. At least that will have been, permanently, my great hope, undiminished by not always being able to show myself worthy. If it ever mingles with another hope, I am sure this latter is just as important for you. I have wanted your existence to know for itself the raison d'être, that I have asked it of what was for me beauty, in all the fullest strength of the term, love, in all the strength of the term. The name I give you at the top of this letter does not just render, in its anagrammatical form, a charming account of your present aspect, because, after having invented it for you, I perceived that I had originally used the words that make it up to characterize the very aspect that love had taken for me. This must be what resemblance is. I also wanted everything that I expect from human becoming, everything that, as I see it, is worth fighting for collectively and not just individually, to cease being a formal manner of thinking, even the noblest, to confront this reality of life becoming that you are. I mean that at one time in my life I feared being cut off from the necessary contact, from the human contact with what would be after me. After me. This idea keeps getting lost, but turns up again wonderfully in a certain sleight of hand that you have, like, and for me, not like, all little children. From the very first day, I admired your hand. It hovered about everything intellectual I had tried to construct, as if to render it inane. What a mad thing this hand is, and how I pity those who have never had the chance to place it like a star on the loveliest page of a book. The poverty, suddenly, of any flower. We only have to look at this hand to think that any human makes a deplorable count of what he thinks he knows. All he understands from it is that it is really made, in all senses, for the best. This blind aspiration towards the best would suffice to justify love as I think of it, absolute love, as the only principle for physical and moral selection which can guarantee that human witness, human passage shall not have been placed in vain. I was thinking all of this feverishly in September 1936, alone with you in my famous, unlivable house of rock salt. I was thinking about it between reading newspapers telling, more or less hypocritically, the episodes of the Civil War in Spain, the newspapers behind which you thought I was disappearing just to play peekaboo with you. And it was also true, because in such moments, the unconscious and the conscious, in you and in me, existed in complete duality near each other, keeping each other in a total ignorance, and yet communicating at will by a single all-powerful thread which was the exchanged glance between us. To be sure, my life then hung only by the slightest thread. Great was the temptation to go offer it to those who, without any possible error and any distinction of tendencies, wanted at any price to finish with the old order founded on the cult of that abject trinity, family, country, and religion. And still you held me by that thread which is happiness, such as it pierces the web of unhappiness itself. I loved in you all the little children of the Spanish militia, like those I have seen running naked in the outer districts of Santa Cruz or Tenerife. May the sacrifice of so many human lives make of them one day happy beings. And yet I did not feel in myself the courage to expose you with me to help that it happen. Above all, let the idea of the family be buried. If I have loved in you the working out of natural necessity, it is to the exact extent that in your person it was one with what was for me human necessity, logical necessity. The reconciliation of those two necessities has always seemed to me the only miracle within the reach of any human, the only chance of escaping now, and then the meanness of the human condition. You have gone from non-being to being by one of those agreements which are the only ones to which I care to listen. You were thought of as possible, as certain, in the very moment when, in a love deeply sure of itself, a man and a woman wanted you to be. I wanted you too much to hear you one day answering in complete innocence those insidious questions grown-ups ask children. What do you think with, suffer with? How did you get the sun's name? Where does the night come from? As if they could answer the questions themselves. Since you are for me the human creature in its perfect authenticity, you should, improbable as it seems, teach me about them. I want you to be madly loved.